Hello, this will be a brief review session of Chapter 1 from the biology book. Now, you should have your notes with you while you're going over this review session. You should have your book with you as well. Remember, the notes refer you specifically to the book. Now, the first chapter starts off with properties of life. They're shown on page 2. They include order, reproduction, growth and development. Those are governed by DNA. It also includes using energy. All living things have to take in energy. All living things respond to the environment. All living things have homeostasis, which is internal balance of an organism. And living things adapt to their surroundings on the population level. We also went over the hierarchy of life on pages 4 and 5. At the very basic level, we have atoms and molecules, the molecular level. We also have the cellular level. We have the tissue level. A tissue is a group of similar cells. Organ, a group of tissues. Organ system, a group of organs coordinated to achieve a vital body function. The organism is the individual living thing. In nature, organisms are grouped into populations. Populations interact with other species in a community. The community interacts with the environment as the ecosystem, and all of the planet's ecosystems combined make up the biosphere. We then briefly talked about the cellular basis of life. The microscope was invented in the mid-1600s. It took the better part of 200 years for scientists to develop what we now call cell theory. Cell theory in the mid-1800s, 1839, by Schleiden and Ch1, is that cells, the basic unit of life. All living things are made of cells. Cells come from pre-existing cells. Now, there's two basic types of cells that exist in nature, page 8. The prokaryotic cells, which are bacteria and archaea, and the eukaryotic cells, which are plants, animals, and fungi and protists. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells have a membrane-bound nucleus and organelles. Other things we discussed in this chapter very briefly that are in your notes is the correlation between structure and function. The structure in or part of an organism has everything to do with what it's good for. Unity and diversity, page 12 and 13. There is a unity of life, similar metabolic pathways, usage of DNA, genetic code, and so forth. But there's incredible diversity. There's about 1.8 or so million species known that are currently classified according to what you see on page 12. The highest level of classification is now the domain. We use we replace the 5-kingdom system with the 3-domain system. So all life is fundamentally grouped into 3 major groups, which we call domains. They're on page 13. The domain bacteria, which are the bacteria, the domain archaea, formerly known as the archaebacteria, and the domain eukarya, which are all eukaryotic life forms. And the domains are then divided into their kingdoms accordingly. We then, your notes have evolution, the core theme of biology, but I didn't really go into that yet. I will go into that more later. We then go into the scientific process. Science is a way of knowing nature, a way of knowing how things work in nature. In the notes is the so-called scientific method, and I list them as a series of steps. We can start with a question that leads itself, an observation that leads itself to a question. Then we formulate a hypothesis, an educated guess, a tentative answer. Then we use that to make a prediction. Then we test the hypothesis. The hypothesis can be tested with either experimentation or direct observation. You gather data. Then you make a conclusion. Your data either support your hypothesis or they refute your hypothesis. In your notes, I talk a little bit about testing hypotheses through a controlled experiment. Read over what the variables mean. Read over what control groups are. This corresponds with your lab homework as well. Now, I write about the differences between the words theory and hypothesis. In science, the word theory is different. See, a hypothesis is specific. It's narrow in scope. It's subject to be tested. But a theory, a scientific theory, is a broad explanatory idea based on tremendous scientific support. Now, I don't mean a support of a majority of opinions. I mean scientific support from hypothesis testing after hypothesis testing after hypothesis testing that all lead in the same direction. Cell theory is one such example. And that pretty much finishes our review of Chapter 1.